places that should be safe until the mask slips. Safety vanishes fast. A delivery man who knows you're alone, a smiling stranger tapping a knife on glass, a barefoot watcher already inside. One knock, one smile, one tap. Suddenly, you're not alone. The Pizza Man. When Dave was 12 years old, his parents decided he was finally old enough to stay home by himself for a full night. They lived in a quiet, peaceful suburban town, the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and let their kids play outside until dark. It felt like a perfectly safe environment for a kid to have the house to himself. His parents had left him some money to order a pizza and told him to have fun. For a 12-year-old, it was the ultimate weekend. The house was all his, with video games, no bedtime, and pizza for dinner. That night, Dave was totally absorbed in a James Bond game on his PlayStation 2. After beating it for the third time, he decided it was finally time to order his pizza from a local place called Gianni's. It was a family favorite, located just a few blocks away. Dave placed his order and went back to his game while he waited. When the doorbell finally rang, he grabbed the $20 his parents had left him and ran downstairs. The delivery guy was a scruffy-looking man in his 30s with a long, unkempt beard, a black trucker hat, and glasses. Dave handed him the $20 and asked for his change, just as his mom had told him to. As the man counted the money, he glanced up at Dave, then looked past him, peering into the dark living room. "You alone here?" he asked, his voice flat. Dave's parents had always drilled into him the importance of being wary of strangers. He knew instantly this was a weird, creepy question. He hesitated for a second and then, trying to sound as convincing as possible, blurted out, "My parents are on their way home." In hindsight, he says it was a terrible answer, but in the moment, it was the best he could come up with. He knew the guy was asking because his parents' cars weren't in the driveway and because a kid, not an adult, had answered the door. After the man handed him the pizza and the change, Dave quickly closed and locked the door. He ate a few slices, put the rest in the fridge, and went back upstairs to play another video game. He was deep into the game with hours having passed when the doorbell rang again. It was probably around 11 p.m. Assuming it was his parents returning home, Dave raced back downstairs. "Mom, Dad," he called out through the door, but a strange, unfamiliar voice on the other side replied, "Hey, I need help. I need to use your phone." The voice sounded rough and Dave's stomach dropped. He didn't want to peek through the window. He was too scared. He asked, "Who is this?" And the man simply repeated that he needed to use the phone. A feeling of dread washed over Dave. He knew he should not open that door. Without another word, he turned around and started walking back up the stairs, which were directly in front of the front door. That's when the man outside started banging on the door and he heard him shout, "Wait, please, I need help." The sound of the man's voice jolted Dave to a stop. He realized the man had seen him. He was watching through the small glass pane at the top of the door. Dave turned around and even in the darkness, he could make out the outline of the man's head watching him. He couldn't see the man's eyes, but he felt them, and it was obvious that he was staring directly at him. Dave ran. He flew up the stairs and into his parents' bedroom where the only landline was. He grabbed the phone and dialed his mom's cell. When she answered, her voice was a little slurred. She was likely enjoying a night out with friends. "Mom, there's a man at the door asking to come in," Dave whispered into the phone. The slurring instantly vanished. Her tone became sharp and alert. "Did you talk to him? Did he see you?" she asked. Dave told her everything, including the fact that he told the man his parents were on the way home. Her panic grew with every word he spoke. "Did anyone else know you were there alone?" she asked. That's when it clicked for Dave. "The pizza guy," he said, his voice trembling. He asked if I was alone. As he said this, the doorbell rang 2 more times, a frantic, insistent sound. Dave's mom told him to stay put in her room and lock the door. On her other phone, his dad was already calling the police. They stayed on the line with him as they talked to the dispatcher. It was a warm summer night, and some of the windows in the house were open. Suddenly, Dave heard the unmistakable sound of the metal gate on the side of the house, the one leading to the backyard, being gently pushed open. He whispered this into the phone, and his mom urged him to be quiet and stay hidden. He heard her talking to the police, giving them updates and telling them to hurry. But then, the quiet dread gave way to full-blown terror. Dave heard footsteps, not outside, but inside the house. The sound of someone walking around downstairs, wandering through the kitchen and the living room. He whispered to his mom, "He's inside." He heard her scream into the phone, likely telling the police to hurry, that the intruder was now inside the house. His mom told him to hide under the bed and stay there, no matter what. The tiny lock on the bedroom door felt like a laughably small defense. He listened as the footsteps started coming up the stairs. They were slow, deliberate. They passed his bedroom and his sister's room, then stopped right in front of his parents' door. He heard the doorknob jiggle, then rattle as the person tried to turn it. They tried it a few times, as if hoping the door would magically unlock. Then, there was a light, deliberate knocking. The person didn't say a word. They just knocked, a silent, terrifying taunt. After a moment, the footsteps retreated, walking back down the hallway and down the stairs. Dave lay frozen under the bed, clutching the phone. He didn't dare make a sound. Finally, his mom said, "The police are there, they're outside." But instead of hearing them kick down the door, he heard a new, heavier set of footsteps come in and a man's voice yelling his name. "Police! We're police officers!" he heard someone say. His mom gave him the go-ahead, and he crawled out from under the bed to unlock the door. 2 officers were waiting in the hallway. 2 more were downstairs. They hadn't kicked down the front door because the intruder had left the back door wide open, which they found on their search. The officers said he likely gained entry through the sliding glass window in the back, which had been slid all the way open. Dave told the officers everything, including the creepy encounter with the pizza guy, with his parents listening on the phone. By the time his parents got home, only 2 officers remained to finish the report. They noted the pizza guy's description, and his parents, determined to get answers, went to Giannis Pizzeria the next day. Dave went with them and tried to spot the man, but he wasn't there. When they described him to the manager said it must be Phil, but insisted that Phil would never do something like that. After an argument, Dave's parents threatened to call the police and left, deciding to wait in the car for Phil to return from his delivery route. They waited for an hour, but he never showed up. It's possible the manager warned him. Without any solid proof or DNA evidence, the police couldn't do much. The lawyers his parents consulted with told him the same thing, it was just a kid's story, and there was nothing to build a case on. The family never ate at Giannis Pizzeria again, and for a long time after that, Dave's parents never left him home alone. To this day, Dave is certain it was the pizza guy. Who else would have known that a young kid was alone in a big house with no cars in the driveway, completely vulnerable and waiting to be found? The Tapping Stranger. When James' parents retired, they moved from California to a secluded, heavily wooded area in North Idaho. Their new house was a massive 2-story custom build, set deep in the backcountry with no neighbors in sight. Surrounded by endless, dense forest that bordered national parkland, it was a home that seemed to offer the ultimate escape from the world. It had everything: a gym, a pool room, and even a full movie theater in the basement. It was the kind of dream house most people only ever imagine. But dreams can quickly turn into nightmares. One night, while his parents were out on a date, James invited his high school girlfriend over to watch a movie. The 2 of them were completely alone in the massive house. They headed downstairs to the movie room, and James, feeling a sense of youthful rebellion, cracked open a beer. They settled in to watch Gladiator. Everything was normal until about halfway through the movie, close to midnight. Without warning, a primal wave of fear washed over James. He felt an intense, overwhelming fight-or-flight response. His heart started pounding, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He kept glancing at the large, uncovered windows behind them that looked out into the black, silent woods. He didn't want to freak out his girlfriend, so he stayed quiet, but the feeling of being watched never left him. After the movie ended, he walked her upstairs and out to her car. The house was dead quiet. She drove off, and as James turned to go back inside, he remembered he'd left the lights on in the bar, the pool room, and the movie room. He went back down to turn them off. He flipped the switch in the movie room first, plunging the space into darkness. His eyes were still adjusting when they drifted to the large window that looked out into the backyard. That's when he saw him. The man looked homeless, wild, matted hair and filthy, tattered clothes. But it was his face that froze James in place. He was wearing the most deranged, grotesque smile James had ever seen, with eyes so wide they looked completely unhinged. And in his hand, he was holding a knife, gently tapping it against the glass, over and over. For a moment, James thought he was hallucinating. He slowly backed away and moved to the bar room to shut off the rest of the lights. The bar room had a large sliding glass door that also faced the woods. As James flipped the switch, he watched in horror as the man calmly walked from the window to the sliding door, still smiling, still staring. Now, they were less than a foot apart, with only the glass separating them. The man didn't try to get in. He just stood there watching James. James's heart was in his throat. He turned and bolted upstairs, not saying a word. Just as he reached the top, his parents were walking in the front door. "I think I'm losing my mind," he stammered. "I just saw a guy with a knife watching me from outside." His mom went pale. His dad's eyes narrowed, and without a word, he went to the gun safe, grabbed his rifle, and stormed outside to check the property. James's mom pulled him aside and explained that there had been a few break-ins and sightings of a man in the area who fit the description James had just given. The police had been called, but they never found anything. The police were called again that night, but just like before, they came up empty. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. Just the cold black woods. This should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. That night, as James lay in bed, he heard a light, metallic tapping sound coming from beneath him. His bedroom was on the second floor, directly above the movie room. It sounded exactly like metal gently tapping on glass. He tried to convince himself it was just a strange house sound, but he knew what it was. The tapping lasted for hours, a relentless, haunting rhythm. This went on for weeks. Some nights it would stop, but other times he'd wake up at 3 a.m. to the faint, persistent sound. One night, he even thought he heard footsteps on the roof. He checked his windows, but he never saw anyone. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being stalked. When winter arrived, his parents had to go out of town for a few days. Still nervous about the recent events, they left a shotgun for James just in case. They also had a huge Rottweiler, a friendly but protective dog who was almost always silent unless he sensed a real threat. One night, as James was alone in the house, he heard the crunching of slow, heavy footsteps in the fresh snow outside. The dog, who had been sleeping soundly, suddenly perked up. His ears went up, and he began a low, deep growl directed at the front door. Then, he erupted into a ferocious, non-stop bark, something he only ever did when he saw a real person. James stayed silent. He didn't want the person outside to know he was home. Then came a knock on the front door. It was slow, hollow, and deliberate, a taunting sound. James didn't answer. He stayed perfectly still, clutching the shotgun he'd brought upstairs. He went to bed that night with the shotgun next to him, the door locked, the blinds drawn, and the dog at his feet. The next morning, he went outside and saw something that made his blood run cold. There, in the fresh snow, were a set of human footprints circling the entire house. They stopped at every single window, as if the person had been peering in, searching for him. James followed the prints around the property. They eventually led into the forest, where they started to zigzag and loop back on themselves, as if the person was trying to throw him off their trail. A feeling of pure dread washed over James. He immediately turned back, knowing it was a terrible idea to keep going. That night, the tapping returned, but this time, it was louder. James knew it was him. He took a deep breath, unlocked his bedroom door, grabbed the shotgun, and stepped out onto the second-story deck. He flipped on the fog lights that illuminated the backyard. There he was, the same man with the same disturbing smile and the same dead eyes. He was holding the knife again, staring directly at James as if he could see right through him. James raised the shotgun and shouted, "If you don't leave, I'll put one right through you." The man didn't move. He just stood there, unblinking, grinning. James fired a warning shot into the ground next to him. The man flinched, then staggered back a bit, slowly retreating into the woods but still facing James the entire time. James ran downstairs, threw open the sliding glass door, and let his dog loose. The Rottweiler shot out into the forest like a black missile, barking and snarling with a ferocity James had never seen. He had a shock collar so he couldn't go far, but James likes to think he chased the man off for good. After that night, James never saw the man again, but to this day, he still feels a jolt of fear whenever he hears a tapping sound. The Cabin Watcher. In 2022, during spring break, Dylan and 5 of his college friends, Matt, Chris, Tyler, Jess, and Sarah, decided to escape the stress of school by renting a cabin in the middle of nowhere in South Carolina. They found a place online that was unbelievably cheap for its size. It was a 2-story cabin with a wraparound porch, and it was advertised as being on private land near a lake. The plan was simple: drink, listen to music, and just get away from it all. The owner of the cabin sounded odd on the phone. He had a thick southern accent and gave them a strange warning. "Just don't go wandering too deep into the woods," he said. "Some old stuff back there. Wells, busted fences, snakes. You don't want to get turned around." They all laughed about it, assuming he was just trying to add some spooky charm to the rental. But the long drive to the cabin wasn't funny. GPS gave out an hour before they arrived, and the last part of the journey was on a narrow dirt and gravel road barely wide enough for one car. The trees got thicker and thicker until the forest became a dark, solid wall. When they finally saw the cabin, the joking stopped. It didn't look like the pictures. It was older, dirtier, and a few of the shutters were hanging loose. There was a faint, foul smell in the air, like old garbage and damp wood. They tried to brush it off, making jokes about how it added character. The first night, they tried to keep the mood light. They grilled food, blasted music, and played card games. By 11 p.m., the temperature dropped, and they moved inside. That's when Dylan noticed the woods. The darkness wasn't just typical nighttime dark. It was a heavy, complete blackness. The porch lights barely made a dent, and the trees were so dense it felt like they were pressing in on the house from all sides. There were no crickets, no wind, just a profound, unsettling silence. Dylan had one of the small ground floor rooms with a window that faced the woods. He fell asleep around 2 a.m., but just a couple of hours later, at 4:15, he woke up. Not from a noise, but with a jolt, as if someone had poked him. His heart was pounding and he lay there waiting. Then he heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't metal or wood, it sounded like fingers. He looked at the window and saw a man standing there, pressed right up against the glass, his face almost touching it. The man had pale skin, wild hair, and wasn't wearing a shirt. His eyes were wide, unblinking and fixed on Dylan. His mouth hung slightly open, and he just stood there, tapping softly and slowly, a taunting rhythm. Dylan's body locked up. He couldn't move, couldn't scream. The tapping got a little faster, and he finally managed to whisper for Matt, who was sleeping on the living room couch just outside his door. Matt woke up, groggy and annoyed, and asked what he wanted. Dylan just pointed to the window. Matt looked over, saw the man, and jumped up, knocking over a coffee table. The noise must have scared the man away, because by the time Matt turned on the porch light and ran outside, he was gone. Everyone else was awake now, and the girls were terrified. Tyler tried to rationalize it, saying it was just some drunk local. Chris suggested it was a lost hunter, but Dylan knew better. The man wasn't lost. He was watching them. They blocked the doors, pushed the couch in front of the large living room window, and took turns staying awake for the rest of the night. The next morning, they went outside and found footprints. Bare human footprints. They circled the entire cabin, stopping at every single window, even the tiny one above the upstairs shower. They should have left right then and there, but they were stubborn, and they decided to stay. The second night started out the same, with music and a fire pit, but the mood was different. Everyone was on edge, constantly glancing into the woods. Jess didn't drink, and Chris kept his hunting knife on his belt. When they finally went inside, they double-checked every lock. Around 3:30 a.m., Matt went to the kitchen for a glass of water. He stopped in the hallway and quietly called Dylan's name. Dylan got up and saw Matt pointing toward the kitchen. The man from the night before was inside. He was standing with his back to them, completely naked, his skin covered in long, angry-looking scratches. He was staring at the fridge, swaying slowly back and forth as if he had no idea what it was. Matt froze. The rest of the group silently gathered in the hallway. Dylan had a pocket knife, Sarah grabbed a fire poker, and Chris grabbed a broken chair leg. They flipped on the kitchen light, but the man was gone. The back door was wide open, not broken or forced, just wide open. 20 minutes later, they were in their cars, driving down the dark gravel road. No one argued. They just packed the absolute essentials and left. They drove for miles until they had enough cell signal to call the sheriff. When a deputy met them at a diner, he didn't seem surprised at all. He just asked if anyone was hurt, then said, "Yeah, we've had some trouble with folks squatting up in those woods. Not always right in the head." They tried to explain that it wasn't just some homeless guy, that this man had watched them, had a key, and had gotten inside. The deputy just nodded as if he'd heard it all before. When they mentioned the owner, the deputy's expression suggested he knew him. The rental listing for the cabin vanished a few days later, completely wiped from every website. They never got a call back from the police or the owner, and they never got their deposit back. To this day, Dylan still sees that man's face in his mind when he wakes up at night. The group doesn't talk about that trip much anymore, but as far as they know, none of them have been back to South Carolina since.